Trust Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street Plaza, Glens Falls. It's 8 o'clock. Good morning. This is Northern Light for Wednesday, October 24th. I'm Monica Sandreski. Todd is away today. The National Transportation Safety Board has released the preliminary report for its investigation into the fatal plane crash in Lake Placid earlier this month. We have more details coming up. And we'll meet a canoe builder in the southern Adirondacks who blends high-tech materials with classic designs.
Sometimes people will get into them and they'll say, gosh, it feels a little tippy. And it's not that the boat is tippy in the sense that it's unstable, but they're not accustomed to the fact that the boat they're sitting in weighs less than one of their arms.
Also on the show, President Biden's approval ratings have reached a new low in New York. And in Saranac Lake, an experimental music show. Doug Weisselman is a go-to session musician who's worked with Lou Reed, Laurie Anderson, and Anthony and the Johnsons.
So he's like a go-to player on the downtown scene. And this project is, I would describe as more introspective, intimate, and personal.
We've got a preview of that show coming up right here on Northern Light. Stick with us. Support for North Country Public Radio comes from Mountain Orthotic and Prosthetic Services, a full-service practice committed to providing care for patients of all ages, with offices in Lake Placid, Plattsburgh, and Malone. Details and referrals at mountainonp.com. And by Blue Seed Studios, Saranac Lake, promoting community involvement in the arts on the web at bluseedstudios.org. This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski. The National Transportation Safety Board has released the preliminary report for its investigation into the fatal plane crash in Lake Placid earlier this month. Catherine Wheeler reports.
Lake Placid Airways owner and former NFL tight end Russ Francis was flying a Cessna plane. Richard McSpadden, vice president of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association Air Safety Institute, was the passenger. The Cessna was supposed to be photographed for a photo shoot. Francis took off after the photographer's plane. According to the NTSB report, McSpadden was meant to take over flying for the photo shoot. Witnesses said before takeoff, they heard the plane's engine shut off and then restart 10 seconds later. A witness said it sounded like the propeller was set for climb instead of takeoff, and that the plane didn't sound like it was running at full power during its initial climb. According to the report, McSpadden radioed and said there was a problem and that they were returning to the airport. The plane hit an embankment about 440 feet from the runway. It then slid about 30 feet down the embankment. The report says the plane's last annual inspection was on April 7th, and it had about 36 hours of flight time since it had a major overhaul. NTSB says it's retained the wreckage for further examination. A final report is expected to be published in about 18 months. Catherine Wheeler, North Country Public Radio.
The Buffalo-Rochester-Syracuse region has been designated a tech hub by the U.S. government, putting central and western New York in line for millions in potential federal investment. WXXI's Brian Sharp reports.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer was all smiles Monday as he announced the federal designation.
There's no greater national spotlight, no greater open for business sign to shine along the I-90 corridor to attract new companies from across America and across upstate New York than being designated a tech hub.
The designation comes as part of the CHIPS and Science Act, which aims to invest heavily in the U.S. semiconductor industry, boosting chips manufacturing nationally and reducing reliance on factories overseas. 31 communities and regions were dubbed tech hubs on Monday. President Joe Biden spoke specifically about the local region when making the announcement.
The hub in upstate New York is going to support a workforce training program for New York's semiconductor industry, which, by the way, has seen tens of billions of dollars in new investment because of the CHIPS and Science Act. This hub will have a particular focus on training people from communities historically left behind, like women, people of color, to work in the semiconductor industry.
The designated hubs now compete for the top awards, upwards of $75 million in federal investment. In Rochester, I'm Brian Sharp for North Country Public Radio.
A judge in the town of Norfolk has denied a motion to dismiss the charges against a former Potsdam police officer who's accused of choking a suspect in custody. WWNY-TV reports Norfolk Town Justice George Gruby said in his decision that a dismissal would likely affect the public's confidence in the justice system. Matthew Seymour is charged with criminal obstruction of breathing after the incident in April. His attorney says the case will be back in court today. The president of the union that represents the Canadian seaway workers on strike says they haven't seen much movement in negotiations from the company that oversees the waterway. Lana Payne is the president of Unior. She says the workers' contract expired back in March, and they've been working in good faith ever since.
It's been very frustrating, obviously, for our members that it has taken this period of time.
The seaway is shut down as workers remain on strike. Payne says workers want increased wages to counter rising inflation and to improve their standard of living. They're also asking for better working conditions. Payne says the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation has violated the collective agreement before.
This has caused what I would call a toxic work environment right now. And that, too, has been an issue at the bargaining table and something that needs to be resolved going forward. We want better labor relations in this workplace for our members.
She says the workers know what effect a strike like this can have both on both countries' economies.
They take it very seriously. It is not something that has been used in this sector and in the seaway very often in our history. So everyone should stand up and take notice that this is a very serious situation. Otherwise, we would not have a dispute at this moment.
In a statement over the weekend, the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation compared the situation to the automotive workers who are also in negotiating contracts elsewhere in the country. It said while auto workers' wages have dropped below inflation, that's not the same for the seaway workers. Governor Kathy Hochul announced 6 North Country airports will get a slice of state funding to make infrastructure improvements. The state is granting about $50 million to 36 airports across New York State. Airports in Saranac Lake, Queensbury, Plattsburgh, and Watertown will all receive funds to improve or replace hangars. Pasico Airport in Hamilton County will receive some funds to purchase maintenance equipment, and the Messina Airport will get money to buy snow removal equipment. A new Siena College poll finds that President Joe Biden's approval ratings have reached historic lows in blue New York. But as Karen DeWitt reports, Biden still narrowly leads former President Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential race.
Siena College pollster Steve Greenberg says half of all registered voters in New York are Democrats and just under 1/4 are Republicans. No GOP presidential candidate has won the state since the re-election of Ronald Reagan nearly 40 years ago. Nevertheless, Biden's numbers are falling.
What we see right now is Joe Biden has the worst favorability rating he's ever had in a Siena poll. 45% of voters view Joe Biden favorably, 52% unfavorably.
Greenberg says Biden's job approval rating is also at an all-time low. 46% approve of the job he's doing in office, while 51% disapprove.
And when we ask Democrats, do you want to see Joe Biden be your party's nominee for president next year, or would you prefer another candidate? Only 41% of Democrats say they want to see Biden as their nominee. 52%, a majority of Democrats, say they would like to see a candidate other than Biden.
Biden is still ahead of Trump by 9 points. But when the poll added 2 independent candidates, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West, Biden's lead is just 7 points. Greenberg says more alarming news for Democrats. Only 25% of New Yorkers think the country's going in the right direction, while 65% say it's going in the wrong direction. New Yorkers remain concerned about the influx of migrants to the state and believe crime remains a serious problem. But over 50% support aid to Ukraine and Israel in their military struggles. Governor Kathy Hochul's job approval and favorability numbers remain stagnant in the poll, with only 40% viewing her positively and just 45% saying she's doing a good job in office. Greenberg says that's not a good trend.
In 2 years as governor, Hochul has never had 50% of the voters in the state say they view her favorably. That's a problem for her.
Hochul still has time to turn things around, though. The next election for governor in New York is not until 2026. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
Keep up with news from NCPR throughout the day on our website, ncpr.org. You can also follow the station on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. It's about 10 after 8. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up on the show, an experimental music show is coming to Saranac Lake this weekend, and we've got a preview right here on Northern Light, which is supported by St. Lawrence Nurseries, Potsdam, accepting orders now through April 12th for cold hardy fruit and nut trees. Details at slngrow.com. And support also comes from Fort de la Presentación, helping to educate and recreate historical ventures of interest to the St. Lawrence region. Fort1749.org. Music now by Billy McInnes out of Brockville, Ontario. The Adirondacks are home to a lot of water, and with it, lots of paddlers. The region is a hotspot for boat building and has been for centuries. Today, we meet a boat builder putting a modern spin on classic canoes in the foothills of the southern Adirondacks. Anna Williams-Bergen has this North Country at Work story.
Stan Zdunek is in his late 70s. He and his wife Kathy build canoes. A lot of canoes.
We always say it's a retirement project gone horribly wrong.
That project is Slipstream Watercrafts, a canoe and kayak business nestled in Broadalbin, a small town about an hour north of Albany. The Zduneks got into building boats in the 1970s. Kathy was doing whitewater slalom, where competitors race kayaks or decked canoes through churning rapids. Zdunek says that back then, you couldn't buy a good boat for the sport.
They were too heavy. They were more commercial-oriented, so we built our own boat. Other paddlers saw them, racers, and they liked them, and it just gradually grew to the point that we were building a lot of racing boats.
5 world champions have paddled their boats. The Zduneks took over a decade off boat building and lived on a houseboat. In the early 2010s, diesel prices got high, and they decided to start making boats again.
We specialize in incredibly lightweight boats. Some of our boats are less than 10 pounds.
To get them that light, the Zduneks use materials like Kevlar and carbon. Some boats are hand-laminated, while others are made through vacuum-bagged infusion, a high-tech process that makes boats lighter while keeping the same strength.
Sometimes people will get into them and they'll say, gosh, it feels a little tippy. And it's not that the boat is tippy in the sense that it's unstable, but they're not accustomed to the fact that the boat they're sitting in weighs less than one of their arms.
All of this is pretty cutting edge, but Slipstream's designs have deep historic roots. To understand their boats, you need to know one name that's really important in the canoeing world: John Henry Rushton, who built boats in Canton starting in the late 1800s.
People will say, oh, somebody is a generation ahead of their time or something like that. But John, his boats have not been improved on.
Zdenek could talk about John Henry Rushton for a long time, and one of his most famous boats, the Rushton Wee Lassie.
Every company practically that builds canoes will build a Rushton Wee Lassie. Nobody has improved on the Wee Lassie in more than 100 years.
Most of the canoes Slipstream makes mimic Rushton's designs exactly. They're just a lot lighter because they're made of Kevlar and carbon and not wood.
His lines are clean. When you paddle, for example, a Rushton Wee Lassie, it's quiet. It's not pushing up a bow wave that splashes. When you look at the stern, you can barely tell the boat has gone through the water. Your paddle disturbs the water much more than a 10.5-foot boat.
There aren't a ton of other businesses that specialize in ultralight boats, especially outside of the Adirondacks. So people come to Slipstream from all over the U.S.
It's funny, there is a physician, a cardiologist in Seattle, Washington. He's a paddler. So paddlers who tend to have cardiac problems, they will gravitate to his practice. When he tells them you can't lift any more than 10 pounds anymore, he literally writes a prescription for a Slipstream Wee Lassie and specifies less than 10 pounds. He sold 8 boats for us so far.
Some New York State Rangers also use their boats. Zdenek says they beat them up, doing things like firefighting and search and rescue. Once, a ranger used a Slipstream canoe to paddle an outhouse across Blue Mountain Lake. Zdenek says that paddlers are some of the nicest people out there.
We've had people show up at our shop buying a boat for $2,000 or $3,000 and forgot their wallet or their checkbook. And I can think of at least 3 occasions when we've said, take the boat, send us a check. Never, ever had an issue. Never.
When they started Slipstream, Zdenek says they had a motto: fun, low stress, and debt-free. That's worked out, and then some. On average, they make 4 boats a day. They have 9 employees, and they've turned down multiple offers to buy their business. As the Zdeneks are in their late 70s, I asked if they plan to retire anytime soon.
When we can't walk or breathe, probably.
But the Zdeneks are starting to transition Slipstream into an employee-owned cooperative. That will keep Slipstream local and let them stay as deeply involved as they want to be. For North Country Public Radio's North Country at Work project, I'm Anna Williams-Bergen.
North Country at Work is a long-running project of NCPR that collects photos and stories about the work history of our region. Funding for this programming was provided in part by the New York State Department of Education. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Monica Sandreski. It's about 20 after 8. Good morning. Coming up in just a minute on the show, we'll meet Doug Weisselman. He is giving an experimental music show in Saranac Lake this weekend, and we've got a preview. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note coming up at 8:42. But first, we've got to take a look at the weather. At last check, it was 53 degrees in Pulaski, 48 in Newcomb, and 63 degrees in Fort Covington, and mostly cloudy skies throughout the region expected today, with highs pretty mild in the mid-60s expected today. If you live in the St. Lawrence Valley, you could see some scattered showers throughout the region there. But for the most part, highs in the mid-60s expected for the next few days before things will be cooling off, looks like on Sunday and into the first part of next week, with highs expected to be down into the 50s and 40s by the first part of next week. So I want us to get a taste of an experimental music show in Saranac Lake Saturday night at Lake Flower Landing. I caught up yesterday with Peter Seward, who runs the space.
Well, Lake Flower Landing is our studio gallery, and I like to say the concerts that we present are like a large house concert, almost like our living room. And we present music that's focus listening. and less kind of dance-oriented things.
Including coming up on Saturday night.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to presenting Doug Wieselman, somebody who I've been seeing for like 3 decades. Doug is a reed player, he's a multi-instrumentalist, and he's part of the fabric of the New York downtown scene. The downtown scene's made up of improvisers, art rockers, jazz-inflected bands. And Doug co-led the Kamikaze Ground Crew, great name for a band, for over 30 years. They started out as a backup band for the Flying Karamazov Brothers, a juggling comedy troupe.
Wieselman's also collaborated with Lou Reed. Here he is at the tail end of the song Mad from his album Ecstasy. He played guitar in the last iteration of John Lurie and the Lounge Lizards, and composed for the chamber pop collective Antony and the Johnsons.
So he's like a go-to player on the downtown scene, and Doug's just been in so many vital situations. Just today, he's at the Hirshhorn in Washington, D.C. in a duet with Laurie Anderson as part of her presentation there.
For the Saranac Lake show, Wieselman's bringing a few vintage clarinets used in Russian and Turkish folk music, and he'll perform from one of his newer solo albums.
And this project I would describe as more introspective, intimate, and personal. It's called From Water, inspired by bodies of water from the West Coast to the Hudson Valley. And Doug loops, which is recording himself and playing it back. So he creates this layered listening experience that's really quite beautiful and contemplative. I thought his project kind of should be presented in this region where we have so much water, and water is a valuable asset to us, in a pride of place. Our venue happens to be across the street from a body of water, and I'm counting on him responding to that discovery of, wow, you have a lot of lakes and rivers up here. Also, we have developed a following who will go where we take them. And I, in turn, am trusting Doug to go where he's going to take me.
That was Peter Seward talking about the upcoming performance by Doug Wieselman at Lake Flower Landing this Saturday night at 7:30 in Saranac Lake. You're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. It's about 8:25. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski. Plenty to do in the region these days, including in Malone at the Downtown Artists Cellar. Their current exhibit called Three Perspectives. The main gallery will feature Nancy Brossard, Charles Atwood King, and Sandra Hildreth. These artists and friends who often paint together outdoors will share their unique perspectives of the Adirondacks. That's the current exhibit on display now through November 11th. You can find out more from downtownartistcellar.com. Also, NCPR connects people, and NCPR is connecting people tonight at 7 o'clock, along with the Adirondack Center for Writing, and presenting the Howell Story Slam at Cafe Lena in Saratoga Springs. The theme is Falling for It. Bring your live, true, no notes, true story to be able to share on stage in front of our neighbors. Suggested donation of $10. You can find details at ncpr.org/calendar. There's fun and fellowship with North Country Public Radio. Thank you so much for supporting this community resource and making it possible. Also, check out the folk show tonight at St. Lawrence University. Jake Blount is a scholar of Black American music. His 2020 album, Spider Tales, was named one of the best albums of the year by The New Yorker and NPR. So we're going to go out on a bit of music from his 2022 album, New Faith, which takes a dystopic look at the African diaspora. It's sort of a story album. The whole thing takes place on the shores of an island in Maine, where Blount imagines a religious ceremony performed by Black refugees after climate change destroyed the world's civilization. This is the song, Give Up the World.
The sun give a light in the heaven all around. The sun give a light in the heaven all around. The sun give a light in the heaven all around. Why won't you give up the world? The sun give a light in the heaven all around. The sun give a light in the heaven all around. The sun give a light in the heaven all around. Why won't you give up the world? My brother, my brother, my brother, you must leave this world behind. My brother, my brother, my brother, you must leave this world behind.
Don't you give up the world, don't you believe you have more than enough to learn, you too young to leave. You and I were in similar places, couldn't consider the intricacy of simple life. Now I'm just offending the basics. We live in a matrix, limitless angles dependent on your imagination. Fathom the pattern of Fibonacci, babbling monkeys who battle over malarkey is funny in it. How could you be full of yourself if your tummy isn't? You eating yourself a live dog, but you mean well. But you gotta understand that you're way too human to get the details. Relax, look up. One thing God gon' do is stay on the cook up. Leave the enemy shook up. Everything is everything. It ain't a thing to us. Just feel the energy of what our mama sang to us.
The moon give a light in the heaven all around. The moon give a light in the heaven all around. The moon give a light in the heaven all around. Why won't you give up the world? The moon give a light in the heaven all around. The moon give a light in the heaven all around. The moon give a light in the heaven all around. Why won't you give up the world? My brother, my brother, my brother, must leave this world behind. My brother, my brother, my brother, must leave this world behind.
Yeah. If you gon' give up the world, then what's the world? What's the word on it? Is that really that thing with the grass and birds on it? And all the animals? You trying to tell me that everything out here is tangible? What about love and gravity? What about humanity not defined by anatomy? What about the feeling on the back of your neck when you leave a room? Or the fact that your mama can always see through you? You want to give up the world, and what's the world, bro? Write it down carefully, be sure to be thorough. The moon and the light, the mood of the night, the food hidden right, the fool in the pool. Whatever you write, you won't do it twice. Cause it ain't the world, it's what you know about it. If you gon' give up something, give up whatever you wouldn't take for you to go around it. Give up the only word you know about, and I bet that you gon' work it out.
The star give a light in the heaven all around. The star give a light in the heaven all around. The star give a light in the heaven all around. Why won't you give up the world?
That is it for the show for the day. Morning edition continues in just a couple of minutes. Then stick around for the Marketplace Morning Report coming up between 8:51 and 9 o'clock. right here on NCPR. I'm Monica Sandreski. Have a good morning.
Must leave this world behind. My brother.